Mame fa say ma PENDREAM TV. PENDREAM TV there osia dem yopo.
This particular bail condition, after it's been met, has been a subject of legal conversation as to what should be done or considered going forward. And we're keeping an eye on how things are playing out after his release. And Martin Kpebu is private legal practitioner joining us on Zoom right now. Counsel, good evening. Thank you for joining us here on Ghana Tonight. Now, you followed the conversation about this bail condition that was slapped on Dennis Miracles Aboagye. He's met it. He's been released on bail as we speak. But what are those specific issues regarding the bail conditions? Is it that the amount, the quantum, the 50 million, or the sureties and the two to be justified?
Yes, so the matter of justification. So you see that the bail conditions were that 50 million Ghana cedis with 3 sureties, and that 2 to be justified. When we say 3 sureties, in simple language, that's guarantors. They should come and sign for him. So that is to say that anytime EOCO needs him, they call Miracles and they don't get him, they will fall on these 3 guarantors to bring them, like when you are taking a loan. So in the same way, if in the unlikely event Miracles was to abscond, then it means that these 3 persons will pay the 50 million. But in order to be sure that tomorrow, if the 50 million must be paid, it will be available. The condition said 2 of the 3 should show that they can pay 50 million. So in order to show that you can pay 50 million, the most popular tool or asset we've been using is landed properties. And the challenge with landed properties, that I'm saying that the properties that have not been registered, that's bare land and houses, they are more than 1,000%, okay, of those that have been registered. In other words, if let's say we have 1 property registered, for every 1 property registered, you have more than 1,000 that have not been registered in Ghana. So it means that an overwhelmingly large number of properties have not been registered. So, and anytime they say justification, that to be justified, when they are asking you to prove ownership of the land, they want land that is registered. And so that's a huge problem. I know people who have tens of houses, 10, 20, 30. A lot of those are not registered. So by the practice of law enforcement agencies, when the property is not registered, they don't take it. So what I'm saying is that we need to be more practical. We need to recognize that since in Ghana, an overwhelmingly large number are not registered, we should be accepting those that are not registered, at least in the interim. You can take it for maybe 1 or 2 months and tell the person to and allow the person to come out. So when I say take it, they'll ask for the title deeds, that's the documents, or you hear indenture or lease. Take those and then do other steps. So like you would snap a picture of the building, you can write on it, we would agree that this property has been given to EOCO as part of bail conditions, so it cannot be sold, not to be sold. Some things, it's okay, as against disqualifying millions of our citizens who have properties but have not registered it, so they cannot stand sureties. And so it makes accused and suspects stay in custody for longer because they now have to go around looking for the few persons who have their properties registered. And it also breeds corruption. Now I'm coming to the corruption side. You see Miracles, yesterday was Monday. If they were able to get the search, so now when you go, your property is registered, EOCO or police will not just take your word for it or the court. They have to take the site photocopy of the site plan and go and conduct a search at Lands Commission. And I'm telling you that when you want a search within 24 hours, within 48 hours, you have to pay way, way, way above the official fee. So we are breeding corruption through these bail conditions from court and the law enforcement agencies. So that's how come this saying that the more things change, the more they remain the same. The meaning of it is that as you try to solve one problem, you are creating another. So as you try to solve a problem of getting surety, then the problem you are creating is that you are entrenching petty corruption at the Lands Commission. So we think that, look, they should make changes so that the unregistered properties can be taken. You video it, you take a picture, you can write on the side of it, this property given to EOCO as bail. I'm just thinking it may not be necessary, but I'm just saying that anything that can be done that will give EOCO assurance that even though the property is not registered, it can be used for bail, we should do so that more people, because can you imagine if they didn't put this justification? I can tell you that that same night, was it yesterday night, that they said they had granted him bail, he could have come out, because that same evening, 4 or 3 EOCO officers could have gone to inspect houses owned by the NPP members that have not been registered. And quickly, that same yesterday evening, he could have come out. But the moment you say justification, it's a different ball game. So it's about time we relax this. If you went to the courts have started relaxing the justification thing. Sometimes instead of going to do the search, and we didn't even mention valuation. So to get a 50 million, a lot of the time they won't accept for you to say, or even if you have an old valuation, the more it's more than a year old, they'll say they won't accept. Or others, they will not even take your valuation. So they'll spend a number of days going to do valuation. So now the question is that you look at Miracle's case. Between yesterday night and now, how could they have done valuations to be able to meet the bail conditions? It's impractical. Between yesterday night and now, at what time did you go to get valuers to do the valuation? No. So it would necessarily involve relaxing some of the conditions. So EOCO has to look at it, not only EOCO, law enforcement, and even some of the courts. So we need to relax this justification to do it in such a way that is practical, that reflects our circumstances in Ghana, that less than 1% of the properties are registered with Lands Commission. So we need bail conditions that reflect the reality on the ground. Otherwise, you have a policy of justification that is not that is lost touch with reality. It is not it doesn't align with reality at all. We don't want that, and it keeps people in custody for much longer. You remember the Wound to Me one? Yes, that was part of the challenge. Then you remember other persons. It's an age-old problem. And then also, as I've said, it entrenches corruption.
Right.
So we should look at these bail conditions, how we implement them again.
I see, but Counsel, I mean, you're an officer of the court, so, and I'm asking this question on the platform of clarity, because, I mean, you've been playing in the courts as your playground for many, many years now. Using an unregistered property as surety, or as it were, as a condition for bail, I don't know how that also will play out, especially considering the risks as well that is associated with using an unregistered property as more of a collateral for a bail for someone who has been arrested. In that sense, what that means is that if there's anything to happen to this said property, whether or not in an event where it is found out not to be the property of the said person who has just been arrested and released based on that particular unregistered property being tendered in as collateral for the said person's bail, how would that play out? It has its own risk, is it not? From where you sit, and I'm asking based on the fact that there's a reason why a registered property is demanded for bail condition. So if you're saying an unregistered property should be considered whenever there is the demand for a landed property for bail, there's some risk to it, isn't it?
Excellent. Now let's come this way. As far as I'm aware, I stand to be corrected, okay? Do you know that even the registered ones, I'm not aware that after the person has obtained bail, the registrar of the court writes to the Lands Commission to say that this property has been given as bail, has been given to us as part of the conditions of bail, so it cannot be sold. I'm not aware. I haven't worked in the courts for almost 20 years now. This is my 19th year. I would have heard. So I'm not aware. So even the registered ones, what's the guarantee that the person cannot sell behind? So we are making a fetish. Yes. As I said, the key things are I'm not aware that when you send even the registered one and they finish and they do the search and they see it is yours, they go and write to Lands Commission to specially keep an eye on these properties. They've been used as, let me use the word collateral. They've been used as collateral for bail. I'm not aware. So that thing is just, sometimes we just do some practices from somewhere, we don't review, then we just continue. Yeah, I'm not aware. You can double check with lawyers. I'm not aware that. So the point is that the one that is registered, that one cannot be sold, but the one that is unregistered can easily be sold. I don't know how this works. That's how come. So to forestall this risk that you mentioned, that's how come when I was explaining my point, I mentioned that. So even they need to write on part of the property that this property has been used Paris contact, then you have an EOCO number. I mentioned it. It shouldn't be a problem because the bigger problem is that we are disqualifying millions of our citizens from standing surety. Then we end up putting pressure on less than 1% of the properties that have been registered and breeding corruption, breeding a lot of anxiety, tension, so that those 1% now can charge heavy sums before they come to sign bail for you. Meanwhile, sometimes you, the person they accuse, you have your own property, or you have friends who have property that they can use to stand for you. But because it is not registered, no, they have to dip their hands into their pockets and lend you money to
Right.
go and pay another person. Sometimes you even have a bigger property than the one that has been brought, better. And even sometimes the friends that you have who can stand surety, generally they are more credible people. Maybe they are heads of some institutions, so their credibility even matters to them. So those
Okay.
people will even be better candidates to stand surety than some person who is not known at all, but it's just that he has registered his property. So it's about time we looked at the justification. So in one sentence, the manner in which you have to prove that the property is yours, that is what is a huge challenge.
I see.
We use only registration, and we are saying using that criteria alone to prove that property is yours is not on today. It doesn't align with the reality on the ground that less than 1% of the landed properties in Ghana have been registered.
Okay. Council, appreciate you for this. Thank you very much. And this is another concern you have raised, is a debate that you're stoking as well. So we'll see if the subsequent reforms and considerations will pay heed to this particular point that you're making as well. Thank you for joining us here on Ghana Tonight. Details emerging regarding the romance scam case filed against Ghanaian national Frederick Kumi, also known as Aboagye, following a statement issued by the United States Attorney's Office. We have that statement, we have a copy of it, and in fact, this latest release, it came through just about an hour ago. We saw this published on the website of the United States, this District of Ohio Attorney's Office, putting out this particular release just about an hour ago. So it's fresh on the plate regarding matters of Aboagye, and that's Frederick Kumi, also known as Aboagye, the allegations of his involvement in this romance scam, $8 million. Now, this is the first release from the Northern District of Ohio Attorney's Office after Aboagye was extradited sometime last week. Ghana national extradited to U.S. to face charges in romance fraud scheme targeting the elderly. This is the press release, and the details as you have it. This picture came with the press release. So this is the latest to it as well. The U.S. State Attorney, District of Ohio's office now released pictures of a house that they say belongs to Aboagye. This is it. And then these fleet of cars as well that they attach to the press release that they say, based on their investigations, belong to Aboagye. The cyber trucks you see there, and so on. And so when we saw this, we sought to find out whether indeed this picture corresponds with any detail in the press release. And as a matter of fact, what we found is that it does, and this is what they put out. 31-year-old Ghanaian national was extradited from the Republic of Ghana to face charges that involve defrauding more than 80 elderly victims out of more than $8 million, according to court documents. Frederick Kumi, also known as Emmanuel Kojoba Obeng, also known as Abu Trika or Swedru Ghana, and co-defendant Daniel Yusuf, also known as Denteni, aka Slap, 31, of Accra, Ghana, were part of a criminal network that targeted elderly victims in romance camps across the United States. Since 2023, Kumi was arrested in Ghana December 11, 2025, extradited to the United States July 9. Court records allege that from about April 2023 to November 2025, Kumi was part of a criminal network that devised romance fraud schemes to obtain money from elderly United States citizens. Kumi and Yusuf acted as leaders of a group that used online dating sites and social media to identify and target their victims, who were often widows and divorcees. Kumi employed advanced techniques, including AI-driven video platforms, to engage with the victims under fictitious female personas. Others involved in the deception leveraged Ghanaian associates, the false identities used to facilitate the fraud. After being misled by false stories or gold or diamond inheritances, the victims sent money via wire transfer to financial accounts controlled by conspiracy members. Portions of the funds were further provided to co-conspirators in Ghana and elsewhere. Kumi and other co-conspirators used money moles based in Ghana and contacts in the Ghanaian immigration community in the United States. So this is another development we're hearing, that they had some contacts, that's Ghanaian immigrants, there's a Ghanaian immigrant community contacts in the United States were actually also identified in the course of the investigation to launder millions of dollars through fake business and bank accounts. So that's another further detail we're getting. Kumi allegedly used his ill-gotten gains to acquire luxury vehicles and other items of value. Assets that have been seized by international law enforcement partners included a mansion in Ghana. So the picture I just showed to you is what they have captured in the statement. This said mansion in Ghana, a Lamborghini, Tesla Cybertruck, Mercedes-Benz, and BMW. Kumi has been charged with conspiracy to commit wire fraud and money laundering conspiracy. Additionally, his ill-gotten gains are subject to forfeiture, faces up to 20 years imprisonment. And so, if convicted, each defendant's sentence will be determined by the court after a review of factors unique to the case, including each defendant's prior criminal record, if any, his role in the offense, and the characteristics of the said violation. In all cases, sentences will not exceed the statutory maximum, and in most cases, it will be less than the maximum. So that is the ratio that this case is going to play in. That in all of this, it will not exceed the statutory maximum, they say 20 years, and in most cases, it will be less than the maximum. So they're giving us a pointer as to how the coming days will be like, if only he is eventually found guilty of the said crimes he's been alleged to have been involved in. Richard Kumado is a former operative of the Bureau of National Investigations, BNI, our own equivalent of the FBI. Thank you, Mr. Kumado, for joining us. When this case began, we've been traveling with you every step of the way. Now, this is the latest from the U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Ohio, the latest on Abu Trika after his extradition. Some detailing there. How does this strike you?
At all. These are details of the conclusive aspects of the investigation. And to the extent that they've set up a date to start the trial, it is important that Attorney General educate the public within the jurisdiction where he operates, so that the victims can have some level of assurance that some level of investigations have been done, and they will be hopeful that convictions will be made, particularly when they have the ability to forfeit their asset and maybe sell them and use the money to pay back those who have been defrauded. And so he, in particular, I think his lifestyle and the pattern and the trend of what he has done when he started receiving the money were some of the traces the CIA and the State Department officers who followed to Ghana were able to acquire. And the investigators in Ghana also play a key role in accumulating many of these investigations and put it up together as an evidence against him.
I see. But then again, there's another matter as well that is playing out as we're seeing now, that, I mean, the details they're giving in this statement as to how all of this played out. The fact that there were some contacts in the Ghanaian immigrant community in the United States. So this paints a picture of a web of persons in and outside of the United States allegedly involved in this enterprise, is it not?
Definitely, yes. I used to be the consultant for the Compliance Association of Ghana. When the financial intelligence was set up in 2008, they've given us the platform, and I play a key role when it comes to financial crime prevention, money laundering, identification, and cyber crime broadly. One of the methodologies many of these guys in the business of money laundering uses is to bribe their way as many times as possible, and to bribe all manner of persons they feel could help them or may stand in their way. And to the extent that they are Ghanaians predominantly in this particular 8 million, plus other amounts that might be coming up in the course of the trial, they use the Ghana community across Europe and across America, Canada, and the US, who have some other businesses that might not be linking directly to their official position as police officers or immigration officers. And when you track the trend and you look at the purposeful nature of what they have done in terms of the trend analysis, transaction monitoring, and the patterns of what has happened over the years, you could see the trace from one person to the other. And I wasn't surprised that the investigators were able to crack the whip, and they unravel many of our guys in the US who knowingly or unknowingly has been roped into this particular crime, and they might have taken their share. And so they have an accountability regime, and there's a responsibility for them to answer. And then when it comes to money laundering in particular, there are a group of people who play active role, and there are a certain group of people who play passive role. It is left for the prosecutors to decide who will be brought forward and what role have you played and what has been your level of involvement. So we might be seeing only Abu Trigger and a few names they have mentioned standing trial, but all other persons behind the scene could have some level of punishment that may not come into the public space.
And Mr. Commando, appreciate you for this. Thank you so much for joining us here on Ghana Tonight. And in fact, it's a story that has been playing out over the last at least 72 hours. And NPP's Dennis Edward Miracles Aboagye is out of the Economic and Organized Crime Office EOCO custody after his legal team managed to meet the 50 million CD bail condition. And in fact, this is the latest as we're speaking right now. Then this happened earlier this evening, just about a couple of hours ago. The 2028 campaign director that's for Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, the flag bearer of the NPP, Dennis Miracles Aboagye, has finally been released from the custody of the Economic and Organized Crime Office, EOCO. And after meeting his bail conditions, 50 million, 3 choices, 2 to be justified, following that particular back and forth, that bail that was slapped on him. Now, we'll have some lawyers who have been expressing their views on this, but as we speak, that bail condition has been met. Before his release, EOCO officials, from what we learned, visited Miracles Aboagye's residence in Latte with him in a partial fulfillment of his bail condition. So that landed property belonging to Miracles Aboagye was part of the bail conditions from what we understand. Now, Christian Yale is our reporter, my colleague, who stayed on this particular story as it unfolded over the last 72 hours. And Chris has been monitoring the developments at the EOCO office earlier this evening. Now, Chris is connecting with us. Chris, I know your shocks might be weak right now, and rightly so, also because you've had to stay back to join us on the show tonight after all that has happened in the last couple of hours. Just run us through all that has happened today, which resulted in Dennis Miracles Aboagye's release 2 hours ago.
Yes, Alfred, so as it were, it has been a long day because we arrived here early morning to follow up because we had expectation that supporters and some officials of the New Patriotic Party would come here since Dennis was not released from custody yesterday despite being granted a 50 million cedi 3 sureties bill. So we have been here. I mean, in the morning I got in touch with some of the lawyers who had already given indications that they were not going to seek for variation of the bill conditions, but would just work to satisfy the requirement as are being demanded. So that was the trend. You know, after lawyer Atachian had indicated that there was no way one would be able to raise properties worth 50 million cedis as of yesterday and in such ungodly hour, people had questioned him that say he was a lawyer and could have gone ahead to the court to seek variation, but they said no, they weren't going to do that. So following that, later in the day, we saw that officials of EOCO together with Dennis Miracles Aboagye had sped off, left the premises. They went all the way to the eastern region to Latte, where we know he has one of his residences to go to conduct an inspection. I beg your pardon. But what we know is that when that happens, it means that the law enforcement agencies or the security or investigative body is doing that in line with their standard procedure or protocol. What that means is that should a suspect meet the bail conditions and be granted bail and release from custody, the officers should be sure of places where they can locate this suspect or they can track them. So that was part of the reasons Dennis was taken all the way to Latte to undertake that inspection, and some few hours later they returned, and as it were, for supporters who were around, it was a jubilant scene when they saw the 3 vehicles arrive, So that has been done, and later we realized or got hint that he had been able to meet all the bail conditions, satisfied all the bail conditions. Then, in fact, one of the intel we got was that for anything at all, if he should be released, that should be tomorrow. That was what we had been told. In fact, my cameraman, Lord, was inside, got, exclusive access into the inner perimeter where this was told to him. But suddenly, unexpectedly, we saw Dennis brought outside. He came to wave at the crowd, the scores of supporters who were here. And then we also got exclusive video of he being ushered into the vehicle. And then later on, he was taken, or, he left the EOCO premises. And so that is it. That part of the story has ended today, that he's been released from custody. He didn't spend the night here as was being expected, and investigations as well would expect that would continue from here. Officials will continue to contact him. He would be expected to show up as and when he is directed to assist with investigations concerning this 55 million cedi misappropriation, alleged misappropriation, misapplication, financial procurement irregularities concerning Dennis's tenure at the Interministerial Coordinating Committee on Decentralization, where he served as Executive Secretary in the past administration. So our job is done here, Fred. He's been released. I think the legal brains would continue to look at the rest of the story and where we go from here. We've done our part together with Lord Selikem Desechi. Back to you in studios.
And Chris, thank you so much for this great stuff there, great coverage over the last 3 days, and congratulations to you and the cameraman there, and bringing us up to speed every step of the way, how things played out at the Economic and Organized Crime Office, EOCO, regarding the arrest of Dennis Miracles Aboagye and then his subsequent release this evening, just a couple of hours ago, after he met the bail conditions, 50 million, 3 sureties, 2 to be justified. The 2 persons, the 2 justified sureties are the ones who made their landed properties and others available to meet that bail condition. The understanding we're getting is that the reason why EOCO indeed followed that's Miracles Aboagye to his latter residence was to inspect and also confirm that indeed this is a location that if they're looking for him, subsequently they will be able to find him, and not that landed property or that his residence being part of the bail conditions. No. So the understanding was that the EOCO went to the latter residence to inspect that particular residence because of where Dennis Miracles Aboagye indicated he could be found after today, after his release. So that's the understanding that we're getting. But
I'm not PENDREAM TV. Now, so far so good. Say open online portal e Ghana. Nipa share, nipa follow, nipa comment here. To my best of knowledge, without any biases, PENDREAM TV.